across the ocean it comes, an invader on these shores, a stranger round these parts. Your boring aunt's car's evil twin. Fitter, faster, harder. On the track, a beast. On the road, still a beast. It's a Honda Civic. Yeah, it is. Check it out. Because this isn't just any Civic. This is the car that makes front engine, front wheel drive look sophisticated. This is the car that invented a whole culture right here in the US where it was never even sold. This is the car that every other manufacturer wanted to rip off. And yeah, it's a Honda Civic, like the one your aunt has, except it isn't. Nope. It isn't at all, because it's a Honda Civic Type R. And that means its badge is red. So how did one red badge turn this into this? This is everything you need to know to get up to speed on the Honda Civic Type R. Honda makes nice, reliable, affordable, sensible cars. So in the 1980s, they decided to build a supercar because that makes sense.
I can't believe you've done this.
The only thing weirder than a Honda supercar was the fact that they actually made it. And what's even more weird than that is it's actually good, like really good.
As I said, I think it's a supercar.
The NSX changed the scene when it debuted in 1990. It was a sensible, affordable, reliable supercar. Naturally, the old supercar brands weren't happy about the new competition and responded by starting an arms race. To keep up with the newer, harder products from Ferrari, Honda realized they had to take their young NSX and make it lighter, more powerful, and even more insane than it already was. I am awaited in Valhalla! The result was a new offshoot called the NSX Type R. 300 pounds lighter and 6 horsepower faster. Yeah, 6!
My favorite number is 6.
The NSX became Honda's flagship, and the car was so awesome it made the entire range look cooler. To help distinguish the Type R, they gave it a red badge. Sweet! And they painted it a color called Championship White, after Honda's Formula One color from the 60s. The car is a legend. The NSX Type R is still a sought-after collector's item in garages everywhere. In fact, the Type R branding was so successful that Honda started to put it on all of the other cars in their range. First the Integra, and then the Civic. Of all of them, the Civic Type R, first launched in 1997, was the most affordable and therefore the most obtainable by enthusiasts all over the world.
Hello.
The first Civic Type R, dubbed the EK9, got weight reduction, a close ratio gearbox, an LSD, stitch welded chassis, red seats, and the B16B engine. At 182 horsepower, the B16B boasted one of the highest power outputs per liter of any naturally aspirated engine ever. In 2001, they introduced the EP9. It looked like a tiny minivan, and the Japanese market got red Recaros and a fully worked K20 motor. The FD2 was introduced in 2007 and was the first four-door Civic Type R, as well as the first with independent rear suspension. Europe got a weird-looking hatchback version called the FN2, which was sold as the Civic Type R Euro in Japan. The FK2 was released in 2015 and is the first turbocharged Type R and featured an R+ button which increased chassis and throttle response when you pressed it.
You remember the little red button? Yeah, push the little red button. And you may want to put on a seatbelt.
To add insult to injury, the engine was built in Ohio, but the car never sold in the States.
I said no.
We were jealous, and so the humble Civic made the American underground desperate for Japanese domestic, or JDM. See, right around the turn of the millennium, Japan was making some really cool cars. For one reason or another, they never converted over to US specification. Cars like the Skyline GTR and Civic Type R became America's most wanted, and the fact that we couldn't get them only made them even more wanted. So a whole new subculture was born, JDM, or Japanese Domestic Market. Basically, a gray market emerged that imported these cars onto US soil. To be sold legally, they had to be rebuilt with parts that would pass US regulations. But those in the know would buy them from the sellers and then rebuild them back to Japanese or JDM standards. Those who had them became kings of street racing, although they had to be careful because they weren't legal, and if you got caught, they'd get crushed. This was all very, very hush-hush.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth.
Outside of street racing circles, until street racing itself hit the limelight in the very first Fast and Furious movie in 2001. The film featured a number of JDM cars for Vin Diesel and crew to race around and against. The opening and closing heist scenes even featured Honda Civics. While they weren't Type Rs, they did drive into the American public's mind that Japan had some seriously cool cars. But unless you were willing to navigate the gray market, you couldn't get them. The trouble for Honda was, while they were hoarding the Type Rs in Japan, their competition jumped in. Subaru took the legendary WRX and made a more powerful, lighter version with the WRX STI, which they made available in the US. Volkswagen took the Golf GTI and turned it into the R32 and Golf R and made it available in the US. Then Ford took the Focus, of all things, made the badass Focus ST and the Fiesta ST and the Focus RS. These mega hatchbacks blew up in the US and around the world and finally convinced Honda that they've been missing out on a huge market. So in 2017, finally, Honda is releasing the Type R that meets America's standards right off the assembly line, which means no more gray market, no more shady body shops, no more getting pulled over and getting your car crushed.
Now, I'm gonna have to give you a ticket on this.
Anybody in the US can legally get one, and it only took 20 years. So does that make the Type R old and cranky by comparison to its competitors? Or is it the Grandmaster come to teach the students a lesson?
我要睇下你嘅武功有幾深。
Well, both are kind of true. See, where all the competitors are all-wheel drive, the Type R is proudly front-wheel drive. And man, front-wheel drive sucks. All-wheel drive all the way. Well, most people who vape would agree with you. But Honda says you're wrong. Unlike all its competition, the Civic Type R only sends its power to the front half. Why would they do that? Well, all-wheel drive is great, but it's really heavy. And the point of this car is to be light. So instead, Honda's engineers cooked up a brand new thing called dual strut axis front suspension, which uses science to produce wizardry, reduce torque steer to keep the car moving where you want it to. That does still put a lot of traction commitments on the front wheels, but a good driver can use the weight savings to overcome all that and still cross the finish line first. Altogether, that means the Civic Type R, compared to the other mega hatches, is both more old school and more cutting edge. It's like a typewriter with broadband and 4K. And if the early word is right, it's really, really good. So at long last, the Japanese domestic market has gone global. The Honda Civic Type R, the granddaddy of the mega hatch, is here in all of its front-wheel drive glory. And at 35 grand, it's not even that expensive.
About 350.
It's living proof that dependable doesn't mean boring, and awesome doesn't mean broke. It's just a fantastic, all-around, everyday race car. I'll take mine in championship white with a red badge. That's everything you need to know to get up to speed on the new Honda Civic Type R. Please subscribe right here. Let us know if you like this in the comments down there. What other cars do you want us to talk about? What did we miss? If you know where my dad is, please let me know. Give me a ring-a-ding-ding. I'll give you my number.